welcome to our Wines for Your Christmas Table workshop this evening. My name is Catherine and I'm with Emma. We are both events managers at the Wine Society. I'm saying that as if this is the first time you've ever seen us on Zoom. For some of you, it may be, and if it is, welcome. Thank you for joining us. But I can see some names popping up already that we know are regulars, and we know lots of input to pop into the chat as we go. Please do this evening. It's a very interactive workshop this evening. So we've got 7 wines to be trying, and we've given some food suggestions, but we're, as always, very keen to hear what you drink at Christmas, what you drink over the festive period in general, and whether you think our choices, I say our choices, whether you think my choices, because Emma is here to enjoy them.
I did last week, Catherine does this week. So
we've taken a bit of a split with this. So I'm hoping you will enjoy my wines as much as I enjoyed yours last week.
I hope I do.
And you're in the Christmas spirit to be generous. So as I mentioned, we are doing 7 wines this evening. So if you do have all 7, well done. It's going to be a real varied roller coaster of a tasting. Yes. What I will say is we are going to taste them and talk about them in the same sort of list, in the same order, as was on the website and as per the emails that I popped out earlier today and when we'd confirmed what the wines were. But as you'll have seen from the suggested food pairings, there are some wines that will sort of cover different dishes. So there will be a little bit of back and forth throughout the sort of the meal, as you were. If we start talking about starters and then main courses, there will be a bit of jumping back and forth between the wines when we get to them. But hopefully we'll all have a lovely time. So we can get started by, if you have some champagne or any other sparkling wine, do pour yourself some. One gentleman said
they had cava, which is also a very good option.
Great choice. We love a cava. And let's do a cheers.
Cheers.
Let's get started. So before I go into talking about the wines, I thought it'd be nice to kind of talk about a couple of things to consider when choosing wines for your Christmas table. And what I mean by your Christmas table, because obviously that will be quite different depending on where you're enjoying Christmas, how you traditionally enjoy Christmas, whether you celebrate on the 24th, whether you celebrate on the 25th on Christmas Day, and then all manner of in-betweenness of up to New Year.
Our family do the whole week of Christmas because we can never get together at the same time. So it's just 1 week of
there's
celebrating.
Many a Christmas table, as it were. So I think the key thing is to decide on what you'll be serving before you start thinking about your wines. I think for this one, it really is a key for food and wine pairing to think about your food first and then your wines, rather than what wines you would like and retrofitting the food to it, because the food is that little bit more expected and sort of repetitive really each year. So food first, then your wines. Also how many courses you're going to serve depending on what opportunity you're entertaining on. My family don't do starters at Christmas. I know, but I say we don't do starters. We mainline twiglets like they're going out of fashion from after breakfast up until Christmas dinner, but we don't do a set starter. And I did actually hear Nigella doing an interview the other day saying she didn't really see starters as a necessary for Christmas Day.
You're in good spirits.
Which, I like if me and Nigella are on the same wavelength there. But I know, Emma, you do
we don't necessarily do a starter, but we have a kind of rolling. So Christmas is a rolling lunch that starts at about 10:30, and then the turkey's served at around 3ish, depending on what's gone on with the turkey as it's been cooking. So we always do some form of smoked salmon. But I don't know. I mean, you might call it a starter because it's the precursor to the main event, which is the turkey. But it's not kind of traditionally you have your smoked salmon and then you're sat and you move straight on to your turkey.
I think I would say if you have to use cutlery to eat it,
then it's a starter.
then it's a starter.
Okay.
If you can just graze by and
in which
something
case
out of a bowl,
we graze, and it's not triglets, but it's smoked salmon, blinis normally.
Lovely. So yeah, how many courses you're doing? Whether if it is the sort of the betwixtmas, whether you're doing a hot buffet, then you will need to kind of factor in that there's a lot of flavour in general over Christmas, so you'll have to factor in what you'll be serving, how many people you're catering for, their preferences. It's very similar to the sort of things we were discussing last week with the how to put on the drinks party. So if after you've watched this you didn't catch that one, you can pop back on YouTube and watch them both, and you'll be well set for all Christmas entertaining. And then another thing that I've put as something I think is quite key is who you're hosting, if you are, because are you trying to impress family that you've not seen for a while, new family to you, or is it friends so you're all very comfortable with each other and you everyone chipping in, you've got someone on stirring duty, someone is on the sprouts and prep. It depends what your whole environment at Christmas is. I think
it's really interesting actually, and it's quite controversial because I always used to be, Christmas Day was such an important day that all the best wines would come out, and each wine I'd be like, right, everybody concentrate on this wine. And then it was one year I suddenly clicked and I thought, actually it's not about that. Everybody in my family drinks quite quickly, which can be quite stressful if it's a really good wine. And so I now just I have a kind of price area that we purchase in, and it's just anything that we think will go, but that allows the conversation to flow whilst the wine is being drunk. Absolutely. So you don't, for our Christmas, because there's a kind of gathering of us, we don't want a wine that's going to try and take center stage. We want one that's going to sit quite happily with the conversation and the food. But absolutely, you're right. Some other people, if you're a kind of much smaller group, you might want to
bring out something a bit more special or just special to you, for it to have the meaning and special to you. That doesn't have to mean it's very expensive or it's particularly aged, or if you enjoy it and it's got a meaning for you, great. And then the last thing is that I would say, if you are the one cooking or if you are the one hosting, make sure that you've got something that you like tucked away that doesn't get into the melee of guests, so that you can have it while you're cooking, or you can have it in a quiet moment a bit later on.
Absolutely.
And actually leads nicely on to the first wine that I'm going to talk about, which is the Champagne, the Boiselle Brut. And it leads nicely because this evening, myself and Emma have got it as a little half bottle, which, great if you are on a smaller scale of entertaining, but also great that even if you want to serve it to your guests in the full bottle, if you're worried that you won't get a glass or it will go warm before you get one, keep yourself a little small half tucked away.
Sneaky, but I like it.
And then you deserve it. And it's also, if you're doing the cooking, someone else does the washing up. That's the Christmas rules.
Absolutely. So sorry, before you go on to Peter, suggestion for a baked crab starter.
That is also going to go on to Emma. We're skipping ahead. We will. Yes, I did see that, Peter, and I was like, Peter knows. So Peter, do you often have a baked crab starter, and do you do it with sort of breadcrumbs and cheese, a bit of a Mornay sauce, or how do you serve it? Let us know. Do use the everyone in the chat so everyone can see your comments. But Peter, let us know what else you do with the baked crab, and then we'll come to it. But I think the Champagne is a good contender. So this is the Boiselle Brut Reserve. It's a non-vintage. Let me just share the little image I've got ready for you. So it's the non-vintage, and as you'll see, this is what I would suggest for starters, sort of hors d'oeuvres, little nibbles. See, we've got some salmon blinis. There's also some gougères there. It's really lovely because it's got that lovely freshness, lovely crispness to it. It's a Pinot Noir dominant blend. It's got that lovely sort of brioche note. We say it's got some Mirabelle plum, but also some grapefruit. So that citrus is quite bright and fresh, and a little bit fruitier than perhaps sort of lemon. Lemon can be just quite tart, whereas I think grapefruit does offer a little bit more, and I think that does come through in the wine.
More aromatics.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's 40% Pinot Noir, 35% Chardonnay, 25% Pinot Meunier. You've got the Chardonnay for the floral bouquet, the elegance. Pinot Noir has some nice finesse to it, the structure as well. And then the Meunier adds a little bit of roundness and softer fruit. So it's a really well-balanced champagne. They age it for 3 years on the lees. So that's where you're getting that lovely bready brioche note coming through. And they use 40% of the reserve wines on top of the base vintage of the year. And then 4% of that 40% have been aged in foudres, so in the very large old oak barrels. So it gets a touch of that lovely oaky texture and a hint of the toastiness without being really overpowering. It's got 7 grams per litre of sugar, of the dosage. So it is a nice dry champagne. So lovely and crisp. Now I see that Peter has added some comments for the crab with cheese and breadcrumbs. So I would say if you were starting with champagne before your meal, you could continue with the champagne for that as a starter. If you've got anything that's particularly buttery and crispy, so we've got some cheese straws, so anything that's like the gougères or little cheese soufflés, little tarts, those would be really lovely with the champagne. But also your smoked salmon, so you've got a little it's like a little puck, a little smoked salmon puck filled with cream cheese, which I'll just do a little taste on. But Emma, what do you think on the champagne?
I love the champagne. I think it's a really good champagne. Other champagnes are available. I know that somebody was saying that Nicholas was saying that they've got the Ayala, and the Ayala is also really nice. It's funny, I hadn't tried the Ayala for years, and then tried it beginning of December for the champagne tastings, and I was like, oh, that is good. So yeah, it's just a really nice champagne. Also like the societies, but you know, pretty much any champagne is lovely. And other sparkling wines as well. So we talked about Cava.
I think any of your, for me personally, it'd be more leaning towards the traditional method champagne, sparkling wines. So Cava, a Cremant perhaps, if you're wanting to put some of your budget elsewhere for the wines. English sparkling wine as well.
Yeah, although
some really, but
obviously if you're talking your budget,
it's not it's not going to be too cheap. But yeah, those sorts for your sparkling wines, or you know, Franciacorta would be really nice. So an Italian traditional method,
definitely.
Some real lovely brightness to it. And Peter, just back to your crab quickly. If you're thinking of a South African Chenin Blanc, that would be a great pairing if you're looking for a still wine to go with it. Absolutely, because you've got that lovely brownness from the Chenin Blanc. I think a Chardonnay as well. So the Chardonnay that we'll be coming on to would be a nice option as well, because it's lovely creaminess to it.
Yeah, so when you said South African Chenin, I was like, the Society's exhibition Chenin from Chris Alhite would be perfect, because it's got just that little bit of creaminess, but it's also got that really good acidity, which would cut through the richness.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I'm quite traditional, so I was also thinking you could do a Burgundy. So anything from depending on your budget, anything from the Macon or a good Premier Cru Chablis would be lovely as well. So I think part of the joy of it is it's the experimentation. There's so, as long as you've got with crab, because it's quite rich and quite,
I find it quite sweet. Actually,
yeah, I know what you mean.
Quite it has a touch of sweetness to it. So I think actually looking at Burgundy, if you've got one that's got a nice bit of like sort of flintiness to it, I think that would be
well, I think it would work. But as long as you like the wine and you like the food, then it can't be that
Can't
much
go
of a
far wrong.
disaster. So it's definitely worth a try.
Yeah,
But the South African exhibition, Shannon, is gorgeous. And in saying that, I'm thinking, gosh, I hope I've got some in stock, and I hope it now doesn't sell out. So
I've just seen Richard. That is a very clever little thing to do. So Richard has put some of the wine into a little 100 ml sample bottle. So once he's finished his event, he can taste them at his leisure.
perfect.
What a great idea. Then you don't end up with just the last little bits. And
Yeah, it's always really sad when you get to the end of the meal and you think, hang on, I've been running around doing all the cooking and the serving, and they have quite frankly just finished the bottle without asking if I wanted any, and then you feel a little bit cheated actually.
So I think I'm gonna go and buy myself some sample bottles. So when it's Christmas this year, I'll have a little stash ready. Perfect. So that was our sparkling wine for this evening. We will come back to talk about it. If you have enough glasses and you have an array of foods, perhaps keep it on hand. But we'll come back to talk about it with further sort of food options as we go. But I think let's now go on to wine number 2, which, surprise, surprise, it's a food and wine matching event with Catherine and Emma. So we've got a rosé, regardless of time of year. But it is a delicious one. So
rosé is for all year, not just for summer.
Exactly, much like a dog is not just for Christmas. So this is a rosé from the Rhone. It's a Côte de Rhone rosé. Let's just bring that. Lovely. And it is the Côte de Rhone Village Ségaré Rosé Sous-Bois from Domaine de Montchamp. It's the 2022 vintage. As you'll see by this delightful illustration, it is, if you are going a little retro, although it feels a bit mean to call a prawn cocktail retro. Classic, yeah. If you're going a bit more classic with your Christmas Day starters, this is a delicious option to go for. If you are having prawn cocktail, if you are having sort of other seafood, a seafood selection, if you're having salmon that's perhaps not smoked, but perhaps a little bit of poached salmon or like potted salmon, then a rosé is a really, really lovely wine to go for. Similarly, if you are doing any little starter, perhaps with goat's cheese, or like a little goat's cheese tartlet, or anything that's like a little salad. I feel sometimes at Christmas, starters are often considered as a token way to get some sort of greenery or freshness in to an otherwise quite decadent and rich and full-on meal. So I think having a rosé also offers you a lovely freshness to it and keeps that lift while still having lots of body, lots of texture. This one does actually have, for me, a little bit of a slight tannic grip.
I was going to say there is some definite tannin there.
Yeah, it's not so much that it's unpleasant, but it slows you down. It grips it down. So it really does help when you've got a bit of as a food wine. It's a blend of 75% Syrah and 25% Grenache. So again, both great varieties that produce lovely bright red fruited wines. A nice little bit of spice to it, and there's some depth as well. This is, as lovely as they are, this is not a Provence rosé in style. This has much more guts to it. It's really, it makes you pay attention. It's had some time on lees. It's fermented and then aged on the lees in large oak barrels for 6 months. So again, lovely texture. There's a little creaminess to it, I think, from that lees contact. And they describe it as substantial. It's full flavored, creamy, has the potential to age a bit. So that's
for a couple of years.
It's not a suggestion that you have to be able to enjoy it at its best. Enjoying it now is absolutely great, but if you did leave it a little bit, it's got enough concentration, enough structure that it would develop a little bit, and you wouldn't sort of lose the intensity of the flavor in there.
So Richard was saying you're having the Tavel rosé,
Mm.
and you're right, Richard. Tavel rosé did used to be, it was the kind of the food rosé. I think now there are a lot of other rosés around the world that are taken much more seriously. I mean, the thing about Tavel was they always took it really seriously. It was always a really important part of their market. Whereas now there are other people who are going, actually, yeah, rosé, there is a real point to rosé. It's not just falling between two stools. It is definitely in its own right. I always think of rosé. Rosé is that wine that if you're not quite sure what to pair, do you do white or do you do red? Do rosé, because it will work. If you're kind of not sure where to go.
And I think as well with the looking at Tavel rosé, if you're looking at sort of other alternatives within that same ilk now, so things like the Tondonia rosé, or even the Greek, the Thymiopolis rosé de Zinamavro, again, very serious contender rosés that you know really stand their own with food, delicious on their own, but they really can you know do a hell of a lot more. And on that note, actually, this would also be very good with some of your, perhaps if you were doing a veg-based main course, so things like a butternut sort of Wellington or anything with like lovely roasted vegetables, a nut roast that perhaps had a lot of like some fruits in.
I was going to say, especially if you're putting in pomegranates and things like that. So anything with a little kind of spark of brightness, the rosé would work really well.
Really delicious. This is from so it's from Domaine de Morchon, and Domaine de Morchon is the retirement home of Walter McKinley and his wife Ronnie. However, considering the work and effort they have put in to establishing the domain, I wouldn't say it's a retirement. It's more of a labour of love for it. And they're set in a secluded valley between the picturesque village of Séguret and Mont Ventoux, or Mont Ventoux. Too many O's and U's. Domaine de Morchon, they was created in 1998. The vineyards had about 20 hectares of mature vines, but there was no facility to make the wine. So they used a lot of modern technology. They completed the winery in 2000. So it is now just over 20 years old. And the terraced hillside vineyard is at an altitude of around 350 meters, predominantly on clay and limestone, which means that there's some lovely drainage. The elevation gives you lots of sunshine hours. So for the grapes of Syrah and Grenache, means that you can have plenty of ripening opportunity without going overripe and without having the alcohol go too crazy. This is 13% for rosé,
which actually
is not bad for down in that part of the Rhone, where it can get quite hot, and obviously the winds as well are that real mitigating influence to
but especially Grenache. It's always one of those, because I love Spanish Grenache rosé, and then you look at the alcohol and you think, 14.5, treat with caution, especially on Christmas Day, where you might be getting through more bottles perhaps than you would normally get through on an average weekend.
And I don't know about you, but I almost have to set a timer to, you know, have a glass of water, because it can become very easy to get caught up in all the excitement and actually realize you've not had a hydration, you know, drink in an hour or so.
You're so organized, you set a timer. Well, I just remember at the end of the night.
I don't want to get too carried away. So they've put a lot of time and effort into their winery and their vineyards, and they're currently in the process. So they were in the process of converting to complete organic farming, and I think it was 2020 that they were certified. So they've put a lot of effort into so I mean, if my retirement looks like that, I think I'll be very happy. But a very delicious wine, and like I said, with the rosé, it is really good to have that structure and that brightness and concentration of fruit. But if you were looking to perhaps have a white wine alternative for a similar style of starter. So for a prawn cocktail or another lighter, fresher starter, then something like a Greek or an Italian white that has some freshness, some lovely aromatic qualities to it as well. I think those are the consistent features between those style of wines and the rosé styles of wines. So it's across the board, those are the nice key things to look for pairing for those types
I mean,
of
I'm
dishes.
thinking when you're talking about Italian white, my thought was immediately, especially if you go down to the south where you've got all that sunshine, all that sea around you, and the wines have just got that little bit more body, a little bit more intensity, so they kind of more match the rosé in terms of weight.
Yes.
And the other one I was wondering about was Albarino.
Yeah.
Or Albarino.
Yeah, either.
So,
Albarino. Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's a lovely Spanish wine as well. So, or Portuguese. Anything that's a bit more, let's go broad. Anything that's a bit more Mediterranean, really. Anything that brings, anything that's from somewhere that has a lot of sunshine, that gives you that lovely ripeness of the fruit, but also still retains some acidity and keeps it nice and fresh. And crisp and perfumed. So yeah, I think those would be.
It's a nice wine. I don't think I've had that one in quite a long time. They changed the bottle shape, haven't they?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's what's flummoxing me, because I was looking at it thinking I don't recognise it, but it is a good rosé. So thank you.
You're welcome. So our next wine is the exhibition New Zealand Cumu Chardonnay. Now, when choosing this, I was sort of going down in my mind an expected menu sort of for Christmas Day as the general building blocks of the wine selection to show, but then also thinking, okay, how else could they be used? What else could they be enjoyed with? So this is sort of the white main wine, and then the Grenache Noir that we'll do after is the red main wine. But there are other opportunities to enjoy this and other courses to enjoy it with other times across betwixtmas, however you would like to, or even just a glass of it on its own. It's very very delicious. So this is the exhibition New Zealand Cumu Chardonnay. So it's down near Cumu River. So we do have another little display slide. I had real fun today choosing the images to illustrate the food. So here we go. So it's from New Zealand. As you can see, we've got a turkey. There's a fish pie and also a nut roast there. Because I think Chardonnay is such a great variety, isn't it? It makes such a myriad styles of wines, and it really does suit a hell of a lot of food.
It does. Chardonnay is one of the kind of it's the friendly wine. What do you want me to go with? I'll go with anything. Who do you want me to get along with? I swear I can do it. It's a shame it can be quite maligned by certain people. One of my really good friends is ABC, anything but Chardonnay, and but she loves Chablis. So there you go. So there's always a Chardonnay out there for everybody, I think. But it is just really versatile.
It is, yeah, and it's quite a safe bet, I think, at Christmas as well. This one particularly, I think when you're looking at styles of Chardonnay to serve, if you want to just go with the one wine. Yes, it's nice to have a bit of texture, and if you know that the people you are serving it to really enjoy an oaky Chardonnay, then great, go down that route. But if you're not sure, and because it's sometimes the oak, or perhaps the perception of what the oak will be like based on previous experiences of past iterations of Chardonnay, then it's a bit safer to look for ones that are, but particularly the way we describe it as like oak used but not very noticeable,
Yeah.
or no oak used, or within the description, if it's saying that it's with very old barrels, you know, aged, but then you think, okay, it's not going to have a real hit of that toasty, rich oak to it, but it will still have a nice bit of texture to it. And often some of these more southern hemisphere Chardonnays will also have undergone a little bit of the malolactic fermentation. So there is a little softening of the acids as well, which can also impart a nice sort of creamier texture to it. So I do think this is a really good contender if you are serving turkey or chicken or other poultry that sits within the sort of the white meat poultry sphere. So things like, you know, guinea fowl or like poussin. I'm trying to think of other birds that aren't game.
It's tricky. I mean, goose, but you wouldn't have. I wouldn't necessarily do Chardonnay with goose.
We've got other options for goose.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's all.
I think
that's all the poultry.
You've done the main poultry,
yes,
anyway.
the key poultry. So with those ones that are the white meat, and especially if you are serving bread sauce as well.
Oh yeah.
Which I know
you are. It's just not
Christmas
fan. If you don't have bread sauce, you need to have bread sauce.
Yeah, it's delicious. It's I could just eat a bowl of it, to be honest. A bowl of bread sauce, glass of Chardonnay.
Perfect.
Wonderful. But yeah, so this is made for us by Cumu. So it's one of our exhibition labels. So we've had a hand in the blend, but we've also very much trusted the expertise at Cumu. And it's a really great example of a Burgundy alternative Chardonnay from the Southern Hemisphere. It's got a real sort of ripe, peachy zestiness to it. But it does also have that slight struck match, that slight flintiness, a bit of spice to it as well, which for things like bread sauce, where you've got some nutmeg, some clove in there, and just the general Christmas plate, because, you know, yes, turkey may be the main event because it is the biggest bit, but you've also got to think of all your trimmings, all the accompaniments, and there is a lot going on there. So it needs to have enough body and weight to carry itself through the entire dish.
Yeah,
I think those are real key things to really keep in mind, that you're looking for some freshness, some weight to it, and some ripe fruit in whatever wine I think you choose across Christmas. If you're doing something with a big meal with lots of flavor going on, those are the three key components to think of. And Lucy's just said, is this a good choice if you still shudder at the thought of Chardonnay? I feel like you should be open-minded. Yes, I think so.
Yeah,
I think it is. I don't think the flintiness is so much that it would be off-putting. I think it adds a lovely sort of savoury quality to it, but it does have a lot of lovely orchard fruit to it as well.
And I do think if you're Chardonnay, if you're wanting to experiment with Chardonnay curious, but you're not wanting to go all in, my advice would be, for the moment, avoid the Chardonnays from the USA, because the American oak plus the much kind of riper styles do give you bread and butter, you know, that kind of really quite full-on flavors. I would look at some of the Macons, some of the kind of citrus white Burgundy, some of those.
These are great. You can get in a half bottle if you did want to just give it a try.
Yeah,
and you don't want to commit to too much.
The other one that comes to mind is the Winery of Good Hope. I mean, again, other wines are available, but a lot of the South African Chardonnays, it's French oak used, so you've got more of the kind of toast and the slight creaminess without having the full scale butter. And so they're a little bit more manageable, and but they're still really interesting, and they're good prices as well. So I would experiment. I'd range around, but Catherine's got a good point. Half bottles, if you're experimenting, is a good way of doing it.
And I also think you can look for wines where Chardonnay is part of the blend. It plays a high proportion of the blend, but it's not the only grape in there. So I think the one that comes to mind, and that I've actually had for Christmas quite a few times, is the Portuguese Adega de Pagos.
Oh,
it's
Arinto.
Yeah, so it's a nice amount of Chardonnay in there, but it's also got some Arinto. I think it's then some Loureiro as well. So it's got some Portuguese varietals which add a lovely sort of aromatic quality to it. But you get the feel of what the Chardonnay can do in offering structure and a little bit more intensity and complexity. So you can sort of start there and then sort of gradually go to sort of higher proportions of Chardonnay and then just to straight Chardonnay. And then this time next year, Lucy, you'll be on a big smoky back USA Chardonnay, and you'll be like, oh, I don't know what I was missing.
I mean, your other option, like back to the Chenin, if you're wanting that kind of slight richness and that creaminess and that kind of catch-all, try a Chenin. It's still got that lovely appley fruit. It's still got that kind of creaminess to it, but it's not quite got the same profile that Chardonnay has. So you haven't got that kind of real butter toast kind of thing going on. So Lucy's on it.
Great.
We've done our bit for Chardonnay.
Yes, fly the Chardonnay flag. So just a little bit about Cumu River wines. So they're owned by the Brakovich family, who are real sort of big hitters within the New Zealand Chardonnay sphere, or just general New Zealand wine on the North Island. So they're based down near Auckland, and Cumu is perhaps one of the slightly less fashionable wine districts than other sort of North Island New Zealand areas, but the Brakoviches have really proven that you can make great quality wines in Cumu, and they are consistently high quality. They have really great intensity, and we were mentioning about Burgundy, looking to Burgundy. There's a lot of pricing out for people in Burgundy at the moment, and actually for Burgundy alternatives for Chardonnay and for Pinot Noir, Cumu are real great contenders to be considering if you are wanting wines of that style, but at a slightly friendlier price point without compromising on the quality. And Michael Brakovich was the first New Zealander to become a Master of Wine. He's been the winemaker since 1982, and he's a real forward thinker in his approach to winemaking. And it means that in New Zealand, they are very much having that sort of innovative approach and moving away from the real sort of, for want of a better word, sort of old world approach to winemaking. With his two brothers who look after the vineyards and the sales respectively. It's a real sort of family affair of winemaking at Cumu River. And we've mentioned about how this is really good with poultry or turkey, but you'll have seen from my slides, there was also a fish pie on there. Oh, yeah. We are a big fish pie on Christmas Eve family. So this would be delicious with that. Or
so good.
If you were doing a fish main course, so perhaps like a big salmon en croûte, or some other sort of large big fish for your Christmas dinner.
The other picture, nut roast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Or if you're doing a nut roast, particularly, it sounds silly to say, but a nut roast that is heavy on the nut element of it, that would be a really nice pairing with this, because you've got that toastiness and the richness to it.
Yeah.
And
so kind of lots of hazelnuts.
Yeah, hazelnut, like almonds.
Picks up on the flavours.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
And if you were, we've mentioned Chenin Blanc as an alternative white. If you were still serving turkey or other poultry and we're looking for a red, then something like a nice Zinfandel from America. So I think the Brazil is the one that comes to mind the quickest, which is lovely and really bright perfumed red fruit, a little bit of glycerol to it, because depending on the chef, turkey can sometimes be a little
Don't say it.
a little less moist than other meats. So you
Oh.
sometimes need a little bit of some juicy fruit to it. So you get that with the Zinfandel, or also a nice rioja would be really nice with some poultry, red or white, actually.
Grenache.
Yeah,
as well
and
works
Grenache, which
really
is
well, which is funny
what
enough.
we're coming
Yeah.
on to. I slightly planned it, Emma.
Well, are we doing the Pashmina first?
No,
We're
we're
doing
not.
the
We're doing the
Grenache next,
Grenache
are you?
first, yes. So the next wine is the Grenache Noir. And that this is actually from South Africa. So talking of options to have, and if you look at that colour, it really is, here's my very white hand, it's lovely pale Grenache. So although it's a wine that offers a lot in terms of perfume and a lot of bright intensity, it can come across really quite pale, quite clear, but still lovely and bright. So this is the Grenache Noir. It is the Fairview, and it's from Western Cape. It's the 2022 vintage. It is currently on offer, but it's even without being on offer, I think it's a very reasonable price for the quality of wine that you get. And this is, I've chosen this one if you were perhaps doing a sort of a joint roast for your main course, so beef or lamb, or if you were doing a more mushroom heavy nut roast, or sort of a mushroom bake. So if you were going really quite sort of mushroomy with your main course, then this would be a really nice option, because as well as having that lovely bright crunchy red fruit, there is a little bit of that umami sort of undergrowth herb quality to it as well.
Yeah, kind of greedy and savoury as well. It's a lovely wine.
And I think it's not so intense that actually it would be quite nice with pork as well. If you were doing, a pork roast, perhaps belly pork, or something with a nice level of like crackling
It's
to
got
it.
it's got enough fruit to it that, again, pork can be, if it's cooked badly, it can be a little bit.
Yes.
And so this would have enough. We've got roast pork actually on Christmas Eve, because Mum, we were going to do fish pie, and Mum was like, no to fish pie. I'm not sure why. I need to get to the bottom of that one. But something like this, I would imagine, would go really well. I might pick up a bottle actually. There's enough juicy fruit there.
And I've just had it with a cocktail sausage, which isn't quite
not
a
quite
whole
roast
pork, but
quite close.
it is, it is very good. Oh, I've just eaten it. I was about to talk then and then just put some food in my mouth. Apologies. But yes, this
I was
is
about to say, you can tell we're not professional. The two of us are just sat there eating.
This is a single varietal wine as well. So it is just Grenache Noir that is making this wine. So it does have that sort of that purity of the fruit. It's quite precise in the flavor profile, which I think is really nice. It means that you're not. It's nice having a blended red, but also it's nice just having something that stands alone and and
sometimes
shows
it's kind of
itself
the
off.
simplicity.
Yeah,
especially if the fruit is really nice and the wine's really well made, then you don't need it to be blended.
Yeah, it's really lovely and fresh. So as this from the Fairview estate, which is the winemaking at the Fairview estate goes back a very long way. The first official tax records in 1699 show barrels of wine on an audit. So they've been doing it for a while. And the estate, which is in the heart of Paarl, it's just outside Cape Town, underwent a bit of a complicated financial history. They were declared insolvent no fewer than 8 times. But then luckily the estate was bought in 1937 by Charles Back Sr., who was a sorry, it was bought by a Lithuanian immigrant who completely turned its fortunes around. And then it was self-taught winemaker Charles Bach Sr., who was a very resourceful and determined man. And he then managed to the estate and really got them on the path of producing award-winning wines. Fairview has remained in the hands of the Bach family ever since and continues to prosper, with the imaginative current owner, Charles Bach Jr., who is at the helm. Interestingly, as well as wine, Fairview is home to a herd of around 600 cheese-producing goats who supply the milk for an impressive range of artisan and specialty cheeses made here. And the goats have actually inspired a premium range of wines that they mischievously call Goats Do Rhone, which you may be familiar with, that are made from Rhone grape varieties. And those Rhone-influenced blends include grapes from other regions where Fairview have holdings, so the Swartland and Darling. But it does lead me quite nicely to, while this is great for, you know, the red meat main courses or the mushroom and root vegetables, it's also actually a really nice contender for a fresh cheese, for goat's cheeses, because I think when you're looking at your sort of cheese and wine pairing, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as well with some of the other wines, it's often easy to get held into a belief that, oh, you must have red wine with cheese or you must have white wine with cheese. But actually, I think it's more interesting to think, what else would you serve on your cheese board? And if that's nice fruity chutneys or maybe some figs, or around this time of year, cranberries, or and I know it's not the most sophisticated of cheese, but Wensleydale with cranberry is very popular, you know, as a style.
Pineapple.
But also that, you know, those sort of things, those flavors do go well together. So actually, you know, if you were having some sort of a nice fresh sort of crumbly goat's cheese, then this would be a really nice option to it, because you've got that balance of freshness and the acidity. You often have that little more lactic acidity in a goat's cheese, and so it would be really nicely in balance. I think it would be a really fun pairing.
Interestingly, Andy is saying that he's thinking about having a Chenas Beaujolais, and I completely agree with you. I think on our Christmas table, because there tends to be quite a few of us and we're quite a mix of tastes, we go from the lighter through to we always have a couple of bottles of Zinfandel, and we also have some Cote de Rhone. But I really like the either slightly heavier or slightly more rustic Beaujolais with Christmas dinner, because back to, they've got the acidity, they've got the really lovely juicy fruit, and it would be a really good alternative. Morgon is the other one that works really well.
I really enjoy that description. The Beaujolais, the rustic. You know, it's true. It gives you that you know, it gives you that little edge to it. There was we had a dinner here in Stevenage last night, a Christmas dinner, and the first course was borscht, so the beetroot soup, and we paired it with a Italian frappato, and the description for the wine was that it was sort of real Ferris red fruit, and that again was great. So that almost fits in with your sort of rustic element as well, something that it does throw another hat in the ring for the description of minerality in wine, but I think that encompasses all of those sort of descriptors to it. So yeah, it's something that if you've got that to it, it really does give a little edge. It stops it blending in too easily to the rest of your dish.
And also, I mean, I think for me, the main thing I think I probably consume more calories on Christmas Day than I do for the entire normal week. And so you need wines that have got that bit of acidity and that bit of kind of freshness and zip. Otherwise, you very quickly just feel bogged down, and you very quickly just think, do you know what? I might just stop here and go and have a snooze. So having a wine that's got
a little
some
briskness to
acidity. Yeah,
it. Yeah.
acidity, kind of moderate, for me, moderate tannins, although other members of my family would disagree and say no, the heavier the better. It's nice to just keep your palate fresh and keep you going.
And again, this one is 13.5%. So it's still on that slightly lower scale that Grenache can sometimes get quite high. This keeps it nice and it's not disjointed with the alcohol. Some other honourable mentions for sort of roasted red meats, or for your mushroom or like root veg based dishes. So Malbec, really good contender. So nice Argentinian Malbec. Pinot Noir for your root vegetables and your mushrooms. If you get one that's not shy, if you look for one that's got some real decent concentration to it.
And also if you're going quite mushroomy, this is not technical, but I think personally you're better going for a Pinot that's a little bit dirty. So I would shy away from the kind of very pure styles of Australia and New Zealand, and maybe look towards more the USA or South Africa, or areas of France.
Yeah, some of the more southern France that are again a little bit more rustic in their style. They just have a little bit more oomph to them. And also I think sometimes a Cabernet Franc or a Cabernet Franc heavy blend would be really nice as well, because it also has that lovely freshness to it. So it keeps it nice and bright, which is, a nice consistent theme.
It is a consistent theme for this evening, isn't it?
Brightness. Merry and bright for Christmas. So the next wine that we are going to go on to is sticking with the second red. So they're actually going to Bordeaux. And let me just pour this in here. And I did think, when choosing wines for Christmas eating and enjoying, it feels like Bordeaux is something that's not necessarily expected in every family, but it is quite a typical wine to find on a Christmas table. So it's definitely nice to talk about and worthy to talk about. So this is the Chateau Cap d'Hôte, and it's from the Haute Medoc. It's a 2016 vintage, a very good vintage for Bordeaux. And again, a nice price. This was actually a Wine Champion winner for us this year. And as you'll see, I've put this down as a thought for the cheese course, or for foods that are sort of heavy in that cheese sort of quality. So actually, if you were thinking perhaps on New Year's Eve, that you wanted to do some sort of fondue or something that's something really quite cheese heavy, or a really nice decadent sort of cheese souffle, this again would be, for me, a really nice pair, which may be a little bit of a surprise, or we may find slight challenge, because it does have a bit more of that tannic grip to it. But I think when you are looking at the cheeses you would put in a fondue or a like tartiflette, or looking at your hard cheeses on the cheese board, they are much higher in protein. So actually they will soften out these tannins. It won't be a real sort of block on the palate between them. It is it's a blend. It's 60% Merlot and 40% Cabernet Sauvignon. So in terms of that blend, it already is a little bit more on the slightly plusher side of a Bordeaux. I remember, Emma, when we've always spoke about the sort of the way that Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot play into each other. That Emma really lovely describes it as a bit like a donut, so that the Cabernet Sauvignon is your dough of the donut, and the Merlot is your jam
filling.
And you want to keep it nicely and balanced, so it doesn't shoot out either side, but you really get that contrast between your structure and the lovely fruit to it, which I always remember when I think of Bordeaux reds. But it's mature. It's 2016, so it's not a baby. And it's a lovely left bank claret. So it's got a nice ripe nose. There is some savory sort of graphite-y minerality to it. And the oak that has been used well. So it's spicy and soft and
it's nicely integrated.
Toasty, yeah, rather than really sticking out. It's I think it's really delicious. I think in terms of a pairing, I've put sort of cheddar or comte, but also again, you could have it with your roast beef or some roast lamb if you were wanting a claret or a Bordeaux red as your main course red wine.
I was going to say, there's not everybody has a turkey.
No,
it's almost quite a relatively modern tradition. So for those who do have roast beef or do have roast venison, roast lamb, this or with the cheese board, this would go perfectly. And the nice thing about a claret is if you're having it with the cheese board, you can continue to kind of drink it for a little while afterwards. Whereas for me, by that point in the afternoon stroke evening, once you move on to the port, it's game over.
Yeah.
I'm literally flat out at that point. So this is a slightly lighter alternative.
Yeah, it's where they are based. So they are the Chateau Cap d'Eau is pretty much right on the river. So they have a bit more of a milder, more even climate than the chateau that are a little bit more inland. And in terms of the production, each grape variety is vinified separately in controlled temperature vats for around 21 days before then they mature them separately in oak casks and then blend and bottle at the chateau. And there is a little light fining that goes on, no filtration. So in terms of decanting for this one, which I think is something we've not touched on yet, but definitely now that we are at the Bordeaux and the heaviest red, the biggest wine of the evening, this would benefit from decanting. However, if you don't have a decanter, and it doesn't actually throw a lot of sediment, but in terms of just letting it get a little bit of air in there, if you don't have a decanter or you don't perhaps have space on your table to have a decanter, simply getting it into a big jug, giving the bottle a rinse if you need to, if there's a little bit of sediment around the bottom, and then pouring the wine back in, that's good enough. You could do that a couple of times and it would have a little bit of air in there and let it open up a little bit more. And be nicely ready.
Also means that if somebody's pouring it around the table, you can pour it to the last drop as well without worrying. So
there's nothing worse than getting to the last bit and finding that you've got to chew through your wine and everyone else is enjoying theirs with ease.
Yeah, and then you've got to get up and ditch it. So what about duck or goose?
Oh, well, we've had 2 questions on duck or goose, and Victoria's saying that they usually have goose as well. What wines would work best? I think the wine that would work best is the wine that we are moving on to next, which is a Gewürztraminer. However, of the wines that we've shown so far, if you were ignoring the Gewürztraminer, I think the Grenache Noir would be my choice, because obviously goose or duck both have that slightly fattier richness to them than other poultry, but it would also depend on perhaps how you're cooking it, whether you're doing a spice brine beforehand, whether you're doing sort of a dry brine. If you've got something that's got a little bit more spice to it, then I think the Gewürztraminer. But if you are kind of sort of just roasting it as is, then the Grenache Noir, and particularly the Grenache Noir with duck, definitely, because if you think about often serving duck with, some plum sauce or I know that's not necessarily for Christmas, it's more takeaway, but sort of a red fruited red currant jelly or a compote like that, then the Grenache really has that fruit flavor coming through.
And the not that we've got here tonight, but Pinot Noir is
Yes, Pinot Noir,
absolutely
definitely.
perfect for duck and for goose as well, because you're looking for a red wine which has got, it's not too full bodied, so you don't want something that's going to overpower the meat, because the meat is it's still quite delicate and quite perfumed. So you need to work with the delicacy, but also you need to work with the richness, which is why ideally, I was going to say you have to, but then I was like, no, you don't have to do anything. Ideally, you would look for a red wine with a good amount of acidity there as well.
Yeah,
Definitely.
David said he always puts Pinot Noir and duck together, both Burgundian.
Yes,
I
very
think
true.
absolutely true. So really delicious to have those sort of red fruit pairings. But I think it's really fun to have a white fruited wine. So I think the Gewürztraminer
Sorry.
is a really nice option. And again, this is one of our own.
As well.
Thank you. This is one of our own exhibition label wines. So this is the exhibition Alsace Gewürztraminer. It's the 2020 vintage. Sorry. And it is made for us by Famille Hugel. So again, a nice price. So 16.50 is not you know, it's not a cheap wine, but it is serious, and I think the price can lull you into thinking you're not going to get as much as you do from this wine. It really is very intense and concentrated with what it offers. And as you'll see, there is a roasted duck down there with some red cabbage accompaniments. We've not talked too much about accompaniments yet. And then also some of the softer cheeses as well. So this is a wine that does all manner of things in terms of pairings, but I think definitely for duck and goose, perhaps more goose than duck. I find even in the sort of the color of the meat, for me, duck seems that little bit more redder. Yeah, so a little bit more like leg meat of other poultry, whereas goose really has that lovely rich fattiness to it, even if you get the skin quite crispy, but it's delicious.
As a family, we've only ever cooked goose once, and we had the trauma of realizing on Christmas morning that the goose was not going to fit into the oven.
Oh no.
There were only 3 of us at the time, and it kind of went on an angle. Gave some really good fat, but it did cook on a kind of 30-degree angle, and my mum and I were really quite stressed about it. So I think since then we've kind of been a bit like, oh, it's a bit tricky, especially with a slightly bigger family now. But no, this would be really lovely with goose. And the other option, which I know you've had to go into, so
just well, I was just gonna say a little bit about this wine. So it is made mainly from Hugel's Grand Cru Sporran vines, and it is we describe it as dry rich. So there is some sweetness to this Gewürztraminer, but it's not sweet that it would, stand its own against a sweet dessert. It's sweet in that when you've got something quite savory, it creates a really nice balance. And it does have it's rich in the fullness of the wine. It's got some lovely weight to it and some really lovely mouthfeel. And in terms of the aromatics to it, because Gewürztraminer is a lovely sort of aromatic grape variety, this has more of that sort of savory rose petals, like serious rose, like pea rose, rather than real sort of sweet Turkish delight sort of rose aroma or rose water. And the spices in it for me are things like your ginger and like white pepper, perhaps a little bit of mace, which again strike me as quite Christmas spices, and the sort of things that you might use if you were doing a dry rub on the goose or the duck before roasting it. So would pair really nicely. Also, if you were turning any of your leftovers into a Boxing Day curry or a Betwixtmas curry, then this would be a really nice option as well, because anything that has some spice to it, even if it's a bit more fragrant, a bit more South Asian or sort of Indian spices, because it has that little bit of sweetness to it. It has that lovely contrast, and it's got the mouthfeel and the richness and the weight to really support it through.
Anything with kind of cinnamon and clove.
Cinnamon, clove.
Those kind of things, it works really well with.
Absolutely. And also, looking back to your cheese board, your soft cheeses, so washed rinds cheeses, so some reblochon or Epoisson or Baron Bigod, really nice with that.
John saying shredded duck pancakes.
Absolutely, shredded duck pancakes. If that's you
it's
know,
the allspice,
yeah, it's
that you get in
flavors.
That's really.
If you were doing a New Year's Eve buffet, perhaps, or something that's got that lovely sort of duck spring rolls, things like that. Really, it does all manner of things. Just while we're on the slight topic of soft cheeses, if you were doing brie or camembert on your cheese board, you could jump back and go with the Cumu Chardonnay and consider that as a pairing with your with those style of soft cheeses, the ones that are a little bit less bloomy, a little less
washed rind,
a little less washed rind, a little less like they're going to run off the cheese board. But really nice. And then alternate options for the Gewürztraminer for both those sort of washed rind cheeses, or for goats, or for goose or duck, if you were looking for white wines, is a Pinot Gris. Again,
Pinot Gris,
another aromatic white variety from Alsace and other regions. So if you're looking for one that has that lovely bit of richness to it as well, a bit of sweetness, and for some of the softer cheeses, and actually perhaps also depending on how you're cooking your goose more so than duck, then a white Rioja, I think, would. You know, if you're looking at one that's not massively toasty and has more of these sort of apricot and white nut flavor profile to it, then that would be an option that I would consider.
Viognier.
Oh yeah, and a Viognier, yeah, really nice and
then aromatic. Tying in with that, any of the kind of the Rhone white blends, so Viognier, Marsanne, Roussin, do really well.
And those are also really good if you are looking at a sort of butternut squash or a baked squash main course. So your Viogniers and Marsanne Roussin as well, really great and fit with that flavour profile. We've noticed, talking of cheese, Richard has mentioned Bacchus for goat's cheese, and absolutely that green, bright freshness.
It's the goat's cheese can be goat's cheese can have really high acidity, but it's also quite grassy. And so going for, that's why we kind of typically say Touraine Sauvignon, so Sauvignon from the Loire. English Bacchus has exactly that same kind of flavor profile, which is really green, really grassy, and really fresh, and they just work really well together. And then the Poison Oat Chardonnay sounds lovely,
delicious.
Do you know, I'm so entrenched that every time I don't have a poise that often. I used to have a friend who loved it, and I used to buy it for her especially. She'd mostly eat the whole thing. And we always had it with Gewürz. But actually, next time I'm going to try it with the oat Chardonnay, and
sounds delicious.
See how I get on.
So that is the last of our dry wines. So we are now on to our last wine of the workshop this evening, which is a sweet wine. It's actually a fortified wine, but also still sweet. But it's a fortified wine that will, if it's not one you've tried before and you have it, I hope you're enjoying it. It's one of my favorite fortified wines, and I think for Christmas it just has so much flavor that really feels like it tastes like Christmas to me.
Yeah, and it keeps in the fridge.
It does. It keeps in the fridge. This is the Casa Ermelinda It is the Freitas Moscatel de Setúbal, and it is £9.95.
Bargain.
It's £9.95 for a 75 centiliter bottle. It's crazy good value, and it is a superbly delicious wine. As you'll see, I've illustrated it with some festive desserts. We've got a panettone, a Christmas pudding, and an orange trifle, specifically sort of in that orange citrus fruit realm for your fruit content. But it's just heavenly. It's got this really heady aroma, your like caramelized fruits, that lovely citrus fruit, but there's also some sort of apricot and a little bit of real sort of peach and nectarine to it. All those lovely sunshiny fruits, golden sultanas.
Genuinely like a hug in a glass.
It really is
amazing.
There's also still a lovely little freshness, sort of herbal freshness, almost a little bit like a rosemary, slight woody herb to it, and that lovely sort of burnt sugar, barley sugar. Think of a creme caramel, with that lovely sugar on top, with a bit of orange zest through the custard. And it's beautiful. And I will talk about it a little bit more, but Emma did touch on it and how long it keeps. It keeps very well in the fridge, but also, as well as having it with some delicious desserts, as a serving suggestion, you can serve it long with tonic and make it a little bit more of a long drink. And again, it is really delicious. Some of the tonics that are available on the market, so the Mediterranean style tonics from multiple brands, really fit nicely because they have that lovely complementing sort of herby, citrusy note to them, and it livens it up. It's lovely, but it's really also bright.
Really nice if you've had in the run up to Christmas, you've had a day of cooking, a day of getting through work, and you just want something small that you can sit, watch telly, little glass of something.
Yeah.
This is just it is extremely comforting.
Yeah, it's an 8 on our sweetness scale. So the top of our sweetness scale is 9. This is 8, so dessert sweetness. I think is it 17%? So as a fortified wine, 17.5. So actually, as a fortified wine, it's not too high.
It's on the lower end. Yeah.
And although it is an 8 in the sweetness, it still has so much lovely acidity to it that it doesn't feel too syrupy. It doesn't feel cloying. And because you've got that lovely bright citrus fruit coming through as well, it really keeps it
fresh.
Keeps it fresh, and you want to keep going back to it.
Which
so
is dangerous.
In terms of sort of pudding suggestions, we've got sort of Christmas pudding, panettone pudding, which we have now taken on as one of our sort of de facto Christmas desserts. So basically a bread and butter pudding made with panettone and some extra marmalade and soaking some fruits in there, some Madeira or Marsala. Really lovely. But also you could have this if you were having things like a little bit of pate on blini, so that lovely sort of orange and pate contrast. I would also have this with some cheeses. I would plop this in with the board.
So this would be, for me, I would have this either as an aperitif right at the beginning or right at the end, and it would be a really good port substitute. Or kind of, I think in your picture, the trifle. So excellent. So we've got the full rich Madeira instead of port, and the Society's crusted port, all of which are wonderful. It's our one time of the year where we dig out. My husband has got so much port in reserves that we need to start drinking it. So every Christmas we put out one bottle. But I do really like this wine. I just think it's super.
Neil has said that it's the find of the night for them, really flexible. Nicola's agreeing, like, absolutely love it. I agree. I think it's so flexible in how you can enjoy it. And I think sometimes when it gets Christmas is often, like you say with the port, it's one of the times that I only really have sweet wines on the regular, as in, you know, perhaps, you know, a few days on the go, we'll have a sweet wine at the end of the meal. And sometimes it can feel a bit like, oh, I don't know if I want to do a full bottle, because not everyone's going to want to drink it. Is it going to go to waste? I don't mind buying a full bottle of this. It's a great price. It's got great flexibility, like Neil said, and it's very enjoyable, and it keeps. It's
you can just keep it in your fridge.
It's really lovely. So this is from Casa Ermelinda Freitas, and the warmth of the Portuguese sun is tempered at Casa Ermelinda thanks to the breezes that blow off of the Atlantic that is very close by. It's located at Palmela, which is on the peninsula of Setúbal, so it's quite close to the Sado estuary, which is south of Lisbon. So again, being near another body of water means you get some lovely mitigating influences onto the temperature. They currently have 440 hectares of many different vines across the domain, and they have grapes supplied locally from a further 500 hectares or so. So the grapes for this is Muscat. It is a Muscat fortified wine. The head of the company is Leonor Freitas. She's worked tirelessly to make improvements out in the vineyard and in the winery, where the modern equipment goes hand in hand with the traditional values under the guidance and skill of winemaker Jaime Quendera. And Freitas has had, which as a, you know, it's quite nice to acknowledge, because it's not always been the way in the wine world. It's been run by a long line of dynamic women, and they've celebrated their 100-year anniversary in 2020. So amazing. I think the skill and the dedication as well is really apparent in the classiness and sophistication of this sweet wine as well. It's you know, it's got a lot going on for it, and there's a lot you can do.
$10 a bottle. It's something we've always got in the wine rack, so just in case. Yeah, it's wonderful. I love it.
Just in case you don't enjoy this one, or you have desserts that you need something a little different for, then some alternative sweet wine options. So your port, so tawny ports, sweet Madeiras, Bagnols, if you're looking for desserts that are a bit more chocolatey, a little bit more decadent, so Bûche Noël or your Yule logs, those are really nice options. Or if you've got desserts that are a little bit fresher and perhaps a little bit more citrus-led in style, things like Sauternes or Montbazillac as well is also some really lovely options to go for.
And remember, those can also work through to the cheese board as well. Definitely. So don't just stop, keep them. Depends whether you're going French or English, but keep them going through from either the cheese board to the dessert, or the dessert to the cheese board. So.
And I said we'd come back to sparkling, back to champagne, and we are, but not quite in this style. But if you are having desserts over the Christmas period that are perhaps more sort of ice cream led, or syllabub or mousses, then a sweet champagne, so a demi-sec champagne, or a Méthode Ancestrale sparkling wine, so or a Moscato d'Asti.
The Antèche Méthode Ancestrale.
Yeah, so
gorgeous.
Sparkling wines that have more sweetness to them are perfect with sweet desserts, or desserts that are, you know, ice cream or lots of whipped elements to it. Syllabubs, the Baglioni, really nice, because again, you're balancing out your aeration. So, you know, don't automatically think, oh, I can't have a wine to pair with that, or a sweet wine has to be a still wine. You know, a sweet champagne is just as good and as delicious.
The joy of Moscato d'Asti as well is that it's about 5% alcohol.
Delicious. So breakfast wine.
Also works really well early. Yeah. I mean, it's only at Christmas that you would talk about that, isn't it? Where you'd be like, yeah, so if you're looking for a wine for Christmas morning, the Moscato d'Asti alongside eggnog works really well.
Similarly, the Antèche Méthode Ancestrale, I think that's
7%.
It's around 7%, and it's so appley and sweet and delicious. one of
That's
my
lovely.
all-time favorite pairings is, you know, on Boxing Day, after you've come back from hopefully a bit of a nice cold brisk walk, you know, if the weather plays ball, you can have a brunch of bacon sandwiches and that lovely sweet appley method ancestral antèche, and you start your Boxing Day off right. Or New Year's Day if you just need a little bit of a livener after some, you know, bit of a bit more of a decadent day in food and wine. The day before.
You mean a big night out?
No, I mean like a heavy meal. Where you get to the point of the evening where it's 5 o'clock and you've fallen asleep in front of the TV, and then someone brings out a selection box and you perk up again because you found some extra room in your stomach. The Asti Spermanti, with Christmas pudding, yes, to lift it before more stodge. That's I mean,
that's a really good
we'll
shout,
hark back to our 3 components, isn't it? It's freshness, it's concentration of fruits and flavor, and it is body, so it's weight, to have the structure to hold, for a wine to hold its own against the dishes.
But then strangely, bubbles, because of the structure of the wine, because of the bubbles, they do lift you. So they almost, you know, you kind of talk about weight and stuff, the bubbles almost counteract that. And they do work really well. So if you've got something chocolatey and you don't want to go down the Madeira or the hefty sherries or the Vito or something like that, then Moscato. I used to, years ago, did chocolate and wine matching workshops in person in Stevenage, and I used to joke that I was just going to rename it the Moscato
and milk chocolate.
It's heaven.
It's delicious,
absolutely gorgeous. So if you, again, a very quick and easy dessert, a bar of dairy milk, other options are available, and a bottle of Moscato d'Asti. That's it.
Perfect. Or perhaps it's a bundle of chocolate coins.
That's much more festive, isn't it?
So those are our 7 wines for this evening. If you do have any questions or any suggestions you'd like to pop in the chat, please do. Thank you very much, Emma, for hosting with me this evening.
It's been fun.
And if you have any questions that come to you between now and the end of next week, you can always drop us an email as well at the tasting team. We'll be more than happy to talk about food for you and come back with some suggestions.
As we're getting ready ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. So this is sort of our last event of the year, our last online event of the year. We do have a Christmas quiz next Wednesday on Zoom, which is on the website at the moment, but will also be on YouTube if you did want to have something to do over the Christmas period. But thank you very much for joining us this evening. Thank you for joining us on all of our Zooms this year. We really thrilled to be putting them on, but there's more to come next year. We wish you a very Merry Christmas.
Happy Christmas.
And we can't wait to see you again in 2024. Thank you so much.
Happy Christmas.
Cheers.